and welcome to our program, the special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akere-Duluale, the headlines. King Charles III leads tributes to cherished Queen after her death, as reactions and tributes pour in from all over the world. Communications and transport workers' unions in the United Kingdom suspend cost of living strikes out of respect for the late Queen. And Ukraine claims it has taken back dozens of communities, as at the time U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited. We begin the program this morning with news on the death of Queen Elizabeth II, which is now taking center stage across the world. Queen Elizabeth, the longest reigning monarch in the UK's history, died yesterday at the age of 96, with her son Charles succeeding her as king. The UK is now in a period of official mourning, with her funeral due to take place within a fortnight. Queen Elizabeth II's reign is one that will be remembered for a long time and for several reasons. Our next report takes a look at her life and times.
Queen Elizabeth II, the UK's longest-serving monarch, had a tenure that spanned post-war austerity, the transition from empire to Commonwealth, the end of the Cold War, and the UK's entry into and withdrawal from the European Union.
To increase life chances for the most disadvantaged and to strengthen national defences.
She was born in Mayfair, London, as the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. Her father acceded the throne in 1936 upon abdication of his brother, King Edward VIII, making Elizabeth the heir presumptive. When her father died in February 1952, Elizabeth became Queen Regent. At the age of 25, she reigned as a constitutional monarch through major political changes, such as troubles in Northern Ireland, the decolonization of Africa, and the UK's accession to the European communities and withdrawal from the European Union. In 1953, she was crowned at Westminster Abbey in the first major televised international event, and sales of TV sets surged as people gathered in their front rooms to watch the ceremony. Her reign spanned 14 prime ministers, starting with Winston Churchill, born in 1874, and including Liz Truss, the country's new prime minister, born 101 years later in 1975, and appointed by the Queen earlier this week. She had also met with 14 US presidents. Her reign spanned 13 Nigerian presidents. She visited Nigeria twice between January and February of 1956 and in December of 2003 to attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, years after she granted Nigeria her independence in 1960, though retained as head of state and Queen of Nigeria until 1963. In 1977, the Queen toured Britain and the Commonwealth for her Silver Jubilee, reiterating her vows of service. The celebration was a ray of light in a period of economic gloom, industrial decline, and a series of industrial disputes. The lowest point of her reign was in 1992, when her first son, Prince Charles, separated from his wife Diana following a tell-all book. Her second son, Prince Andrew, also separated from his wife, and her only daughter, Princess Anne, divorced her husband, while Windsor Castle was seriously damaged by fire. Then there was Diana's death in 1997. Things brightened again when the Golden Jubilee came along in 2002, and Britain once again showed their support for the monarchy. In 2012, the Queen once again toured every region of Britain ahead of a 4-day party marking her Diamond Jubilee, while other royals made visits across the Commonwealth. The monarch followed up with a starring role at the London Olympics, appearing alongside James Bond, actor Daniel Craig, at the opening ceremony. When the coronavirus struck in 2020, the Queen was forced into isolation, but she continued to carry out her engagements online. She braved through the passing of her beloved Prince Philip and his funeral in April 2021. Fears for her health grew later, after she spent a night in hospital out of an abundance of caution. Perhaps the last time the Queen was seen, was at the celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in June this year, when she appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace for a few minutes and waved, much to the delights of the crowd. And after 70 years of service, Her Majesty, loved by Britons and around the world, passed away peacefully at her home in Balmoral Castle. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
After ruling Britain for 70 years, Queen Elizabeth is now being mourned by the world as tributes pour in from world leaders and dignitaries. France's Emmanuel Macron led the tributes, remembering a kind-hearted queen who was a friend of France. And former U.S. President Barack Obama said the queen had captivated the world with a reign defined by grace, elegance, and a tireless work ethic. The current U.S. President Joe Biden described her as more than a monarch, saying she defined an era. Queen Elizabeth met 14 U.S. presidents during her reign. The Queen also reigned during the leadership of 12 Canadian prime ministers. Speaking shortly after the news of her passing was announced, an emotional Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said she had an obvious, deep and abiding love for Canadians. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa had, on behalf of the government and people of the country, expressed his profound and sincere condolences to His Majesty King Charles III on the passing of Queen Elizabeth. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi recalled his memorable meetings with the monarch during 2 UK visits. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, in his tribute said Queen Elizabeth was a reassuring presence throughout decades of sweeping change, including the decolonization of Africa and Asia and the evolution of the Commonwealth. For Pope Francis, he was deeply saddened by the death of Queen Elizabeth II and offered his condolences to her family and her successor, King Charles. And mourners laid flowers at the gates of Balmoral Castle this morning in honor of the Queen. Thousands have also gathered outside Buckingham Palace in central London, and there was a stunned silence when the flag was lowered to half-mast. The crowd surged to the gates as the notice announcing the death of the only monarch most of them had ever known was attached to the black iron gates. And U.S. President Joe Biden signed the condolence book at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C., following the death of Queen Elizabeth. The First Lady, Jill Biden, also sat down to sign the book. At the embassy, the Union Jack was lowered to fly at half-mast in tribute to Her Majesty, the Queen.
I just stopped by the British Embassy to sign the condolence book in her honor. I had the opportunity to meet her before she passed, and she was an incredibly gracious and decent woman. And the thoughts and prayers of the American people are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief.
And in spite of the ongoing war in his country, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also joined world leaders in offering condolences to the British royal family following the death of Queen Elizabeth. In his video address, Mr. Zelensky described the news as a heavy loss for the entire Europe and for the world. Let's speak now to Paul Ejime, International Affairs Analyst, who joins us from the British capital, London. Good morning to you, Mr. Ejime. Thank you for your time this morning. Mr. Ejime, can you hear me? It does seem as if we're having a bit of difficulty with that. We'll get back to him in just a moment. Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent his condolences over Queen Elizabeth's death to the new British monarch. According to him, the most important events in the modern history of the United Kingdom are inseparably linked to the name of Her Majesty. For many decades, Elizabeth II rightfully enjoyed the love and respect of her subjects, as well as the authority on the world stage, and wishing Charles III courage and perseverance in the face of this heavy and irreparable loss. According to him, I ask you to convey the words of sincere sympathy and support to members of the royal family and all the people of Great Britain. That's from the Russian leader. 3 British trade unions that represent the country's postal and trade services workers have announced the suspension of planned strikes following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. The Communication Workers Union called off plans for a Friday strike, that's today, after the news broke yesterday. The decision was made, quote, out of respect for the late Queen's service to the country and her family. The National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers said it had suspended its strikes planned for September 15th and 17th for the same reason. The Transport Salaried Staffs Association cancelled industrial actions planned for September and said it would be respecting the period of public mourning. British employers in various sectors of the economy have faced a wave of protests recently, with workers demanding higher pay, amongst other things, to counteract the double-digit inflation that has come across as a result of the war in Ukraine. All right, I understand now we have a good line to Mr. Paul Ejime, who is joining us from London. Good morning to you. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, good morning. Actually, I'm in Nigeria at the moment. I'm visiting, so.
Oh, my apologies. My apologies. The information we have was that you were in London, but thank you for joining us all the same. Let's look at this. Of course, the news is that the Queen is much beloved, especially by the people of her domain, and she has been a symbol of stability within that domain for so many years. But with her passing now, looking forward, we have a new monarch. His style is likely to be different, but so many people have gotten used to the Queen. For most Britons, they don't know any other monarch. So how do you perceive this easing to be? Will it be an easy one, you think?
So, well, let us commiserate with our British friends and then the royal family and everybody, and the Queen's, you know, those who, a kind-hearted woman, a woman of dignity. Back to the transition, I think it's going to be difficult because the two, you know, have different characters. You know, like you said, many have come to know her, that carries a woman that carries grace, a unifying factor, stabilizing the family. The family hasn't done quite well in terms of, you know, about the many scandals, but she has borne those with equanimity, and then losing the husband for 73 years only last year. I think that also got to her. So whether it remains to be seen what Prince Charles III will bring to the to royalty. Already he has a checkered history, and if you follow that, many have not recovered from the death of Diana, the former wife, and so on and so forth. So it is going to be, let's say, difficult will be an understatement, because already many people are considering the monarchy as anachronistic, and then but the Queen has weathered that storm, trying to bring everybody together in her grace and the way she carried herself, which will be lacking in a Prince, in a King Charles III. Not he has ceased to now be a prince. So it's going to be difficult, and it's a case of what does he do? Can he change? Can a leopard change the sports at this late hour at 73? I doubt, but let's wait and see.
That is very instructive, and many who have pointed out that that is equally very important, because part of the reason why the Queen, the late Queen that is, was seen as a symbol of stability was that she seemed to float above it all, and her service and her perception in the public eye was mostly positive for so long. As you pointed out, Charles does not seem to be in that. Of course, as time goes on, we'll see at 73, he's taking the crown at 73, not at 25, which she took it at. So that's another difference. But the world has also changed. So many people associate the Queen with the last vestiges of colonialism and the great days of very enduring monarchies. But those who have come after her, particularly in Britain, you've pointed out that they haven't seemed to match up to the public's expectations, which may have also fueled the cause for the abolition of the monarchy, or for it to be viewed as something that is anachronistic. Going ahead now, again, do we see a situation where what happens with the British monarchy can in fact be associated with the Commonwealth itself, which is a body which is, you know, of former British colonies, essentially? Okay, we seem to be having some difficulty with Mr. Ejime again.
Well, a lot will yes,
okay, please go on.
A lot will depend on. Yes, I say a lot will depend on how King Charles III carries himself, and but it will be nobody should be expecting her to be of the same hue as the mother. Because these are three different individuals. And you made it clear. The mother ascended the throne at 25. Now he's coming there at 73. That already, you cannot ask a 73-year-old man to change his ways. That's one thing. So, but in relation to the Commonwealth of 56 countries, and then 14 or 15 other former colonies that the monarchy overseas as a sovereign, as it were, even you know, ceremonial head, that is going to be an issue. And British relationship with the rest of the world too. The Queen has seen the British Empire collapse. She has also seen Britain exit the European Union, and seen the world. Look at the work happening now. And all the scandals of the royal family. And then look at the grandchildren, Harry, with what he's going through with the wife. They have excused themselves of royal assignments. That is, these are things that probably brought some hurt to the late Queen. And then also the death of the husband. But how would a King Charles III manage these diversities, and then scandals will not cease? And so how is he going to, that is if he's also not part of it in himself, in the way he conducts himself. But the world is watching. With whatever you say, the royalty, the monarch has come to signify an essential part of British history and British culture and British tradition. So I think whatever happens, no matter the change, I don't think they will entirely throw it overboard. Perhaps there will be some diminishing of the relevance. But remember that they will still leave the traditions, like, for instance, the queen, the king, or the royalty having to give a royal blessing to who becomes the prime minister, and all that. You will also see a new stamp coming up. You will see the national anthem changing from God Save the Queen to God Save the King. And then what else? The new stamp will also be issued. So these are some of the changes that will come. But in relation with the rest of the world, I think people are watching. They have come to see Prince Charles, now King Charles, from a different, you know, growing up to become an adult, and you know, at 73. So they will be expecting that there are no, what do you call it, bombs coming out, but conciliatory kind of thing. I think here you will have the role of the advisors, those who are advising the monarch, to be able to come up to it and make sure that there are no false steps, or that the fault lines are not further deepened or broadened than they have already been. So that is the issue. The world is watching. The British are grieving, and those who have had you know, relationship with the Queen, and there are millions, if not trillions of them. The Commonwealth has 56 countries, and they constitute about a third of the world population. And then you add the 14 or 15 other former colonies where the the king, the monarchy had remained, a titular head, as it were. So it is going to be King Charles III has got his job cut out for him, and we'll need a lot of luck. We need a lot of advice from those who are managing the royalty to make sure that the damage is not already, more serious than it already is.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Paul Ejime, for your time and for your perspective on this issue this morning. We thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up after the break, Belgian minister backs price cap on all EU gas imports, not only on Russian gas. That's in a moment. Please stay on with us. Welcome back to the Russian invasion. Now, Ukraine has hailed a lightning counteroffensive it says is responsible for recapturing swathes of its territory in the east and south as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited the country to pledge further aid. However, Vitaly Gonchev, a local pro-Russian official, told Russian state television that Russian forces had fought off a Ukrainian attempt to encircle and capture Balaklia, which he said remained in Russian hands. Earlier, Ukrainian Brigadier General Oleksiy Gromov said troops had advanced up to 50 kilometers behind Russian lines and captured more than 20 villages in the Kharkiv region. If the gains are confirmed and held, it would be a serious blow for Russia, which Western intelligence services say has suffered significant casualties. It will also represent a big boost for Ukraine, which is keen to show its Western backers that it can change the facts on the ground by force and deserves continued support. Ukraine has for weeks been talking about a big counteroffensive in the south around Kherson.
During
the course of our defensive operations, which are still underway, our heroes have liberated dozens of settlements. And today, this tendency continues and there are new results. In total, since September the 1st, more than 1,000 square kilometers of our territories were liberated. Thanks to all who ensured it. Thanks to the army, intelligence officers, special forces officers for every Ukrainian flag raised these days.
Дякую армії, розвідникам, спецслужбовцям за кожен український прапор.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has approved an additional $675 million in a weapons package for Ukraine. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said this as ministers met to discuss how to give Kiev long-term support in countering Russia's invasion. General Austin, who was speaking at the start of a meeting of dozens of defense ministers at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, said the gathering would discuss how countries could work together to train Ukrainian forces and improve their own defense industrial bases for the long haul. Washington has already provided more than $10 billion in military assistance, that's $10 billion, to President Volodymyr Zelensky's government since Russian troops invaded on February the 24th. The latest U.S. package will include more ammunitions, Humvees, and anti-tank systems.
And we must evolve as the fight evolves. In the weeks since the contact group last met, the United States has committed another $6.3 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. And yesterday, the President approved the latest tranche of U.S. assistance to Ukraine, valued up to $675 million. We established this contact group as the free world was racing to meet Ukraine's most urgent requirements. But today, this contact group needs to position itself to sustain Ukraine's brave defenders for the long haul. And that means a continued and determined flow of capability now. It means moving urgently to innovate and to push all of our defense industrial bases to provide Ukraine with the tools that it will need for the hard road ahead.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, believes Ukraine is using its modern Western weapons to devastating effect, striking hundreds of Russian targets with the U.S.-supplied HIMARS rocket system. General Marley was speaking to reporters after the meeting just referenced at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. The ministers were meeting to discuss how to support Kiev with military aid over the long haul as the 6-month-old conflict, which has killed thousands and reduced many Ukrainian cities to rubble, has settled into a war of attrition fought primarily in eastern and southern Ukraine.
The United States has provided almost 500,000 rounds of 155 artillery as an example. The United States has made a significant commitment, but so have the other countries. All of the countries are providing and according to their need, and Ukraine is being well supplied with all of the systems needed to defend themselves. We are seeing real and measurable gains from Ukraine in the use of these systems. For example, the Ukrainians have struck over 400 targets with the HIMARS, and they've had devastating effect. Russian lines of communication and supply channels are severely strained.
The Ukrainians have put to use, good use, the equipment that we provided them, and we see those effects on the battlefield as we speak. HIMARS are one example, but there are other examples as well. Ukrainians have inflicted significant damage to the Russian supply lines and ammunition supply points and command and control nodes as they continue to shape the battlefield to be able to maneuver to retake some of their sovereign territory. We had some good conversations today about Ukraine's self-defense priorities. Right now, Ukraine urgently needs more artillery systems and ammunition. It also needs air defense, coastal defense, and other critical capabilities. The United States has stepped up to meet those needs, and I'm very glad that so many of our allies and partners have as well.
And Russia has reiterated that it will not close up to Europe in response to European Union curbs on visas for Russians, but that Moscow would take retaliatory action. EU foreign ministers agreed last week on measures to make it harder and more costly for Russian citizens to enter the bloc. But the Kremlin has called such restrictions ridiculous. Since then, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland have all said they will limit the entry of Russian nationals. Mr. Karova, the spokesman of the foreign ministry in Russia, shared a view that this step reveals the essence of liberalism, which is actually a liberal dictatorship. She also calls it Russia-phobic nature of the political forces now in charge of Baltic states and, unfortunately, in Poland. And Belgium has said it supports a price cap on all EU gas imports, warning singling out Russian purchases would not help bring down energy prices for European households and businesses. The price cap on Russian pipeline gas imports proposed by the EU executive ahead of today's ministerial talks has so far had a mixed reception amongst the bloc's 27 nations. Belgian Minister Tine van der Straten said her country wants an EU-wide dynamic price cap on exchange-traded gas that is linked to Asian markets, something she said would ensure safety of supplies. Ms. van der Straten said the 27 energy ministers should give clear guidance to the European Commission to act on lower energy prices today. She said the cap would then take effect in a matter of days. For the time being, tapping into windfall profits, as proposed by the Commission, was acceptable as it would give EU countries money for direct support for those struggling with high energy bills. Let's talk to energy expert and security consultant Tim Olodo, who joins us from the British capital, London. Good morning to you, and condolences for the passing away of the Monarch in Great Britain.
Thank you so much. He was a stable hand to have, always very supportive of our people, and that's the reason why the whole nation, regardless of color, creed, and status, are all celebrating a beautiful life.
I asked my previous guest about the transition, though so many people, myself included, yourself included, have no other monarch in Britain. So this transition will be a slow process. And we have watched now King Charles III grow up. So this transition is going to be difficult, going to be challenging, if not difficult.
Definitely, there's no doubt. My parents grew up, they grew up in Nigeria as part of the British Empire and traveled to the UK in the 60s where I was born myself. And they've always talked of the Queen at a very high level. And she's always maintained that status. And we're hoping that King Charles, when he's coronated, will live up to expectation because he's actually going to try and fit into a big shoe and a great example left by the Queen herself.
Indeed. Let's discuss something else which might color his ascension to the throne. He's coming to the throne just as Liz Truss is settling in as Prime Minister at a very difficult time, a very challenging economic time for most Britons. Talking about high energy costs, talking about costs of living. We did mention strikes earlier on in the program, which have now been suspended because of the death of the Queen. But the problems are still there, and they are all directly related to this war in Ukraine. So,
yes,
the monarch is supposed to be above politics, so we don't expect him to have a view on the war in Ukraine. But the truth is that at various points, there must be a meeting of minds as to what is to happen with all these new political actors on the stage at this very critical time.
I think there is going to be conversations held within the corridors of power because Prince Charles, before he becomes king, has always been one of those very free thinkers that seem to speak his mind on the issue of climate change and some issues. So I think some people within the corridors of power will be hoping he will be able to hold his lips, and rather, have that, honest conversation with them instead of being public. I think he will not jump into politics. I hope he will not. Of course, a lot of people will be expecting him to speak up on a variety of issues, and there are ways that he could speak up to encourage the nation. And I think this has actually turned out to be very good for Liz Truss, because at the end of the day, she needs that honeymoon in this season, and a lot of people will be concentrating on coming together rather than infighting and more or less challenging her on what her plans will be, at least for the meantime. So she has that breathing space to be able to put things in place. And of course, she has always promised, and many will remember, many of the viewers remember, she's one of those that were banned by the Russian president, at least restricted. But of course, we've seen the goodwill from the Russians who have sent condolence messages. Let's hope maybe this may help again to smoothen the relationship between Britain and Russia. Who knows? But time will tell. But as Ukraine continues to pound Russia in many different angles, Russians, of course, will not be happy, because Americans, the British, are part of the people that are helping to, strengthen the Ukraine to face up to them.
Indeed, that was going to be my next question, because coming to the conflict itself, there seems to be no let-up. As a matter of fact, rather than a let-up, now it seems as if the counter-offensive, which had been talked about for so long by Ukraine, is now in full force, and its backers, its military backers in the West, are continuing with all efforts to provide more and more weapons for it to be able to sustain this defense. On the other hand, the Russians themselves are about to commence, or have just done, some military drills with some countries that are friendly to Russia, and they've derived quite a bit of strength from that. Iran is sending them drones. That's the one we know publicly, and a couple of others. So again, a slow war of attrition. Nobody seems to be able to strike the decisive blow here to end this conflict.
No, and it's quite interesting now watching some of the clips that you played, because you could see the confidence of the Americans saying, on the battlefield, on the battlefield. And I think myself and yourself, we've had this conversation that Ukraine is the battlefield. And the West, as far as I'm concerned, are using Ukraine as the gimmick to test their weapons, whether you like it or not. They're using it. The British government is training 10,000 soldiers or troops every 3 months. They're giving them up to $2.3 billion pounds have been given. Americans have pledged 2.2 billion in a new, security assistance. So there's no letting off, and it's not just these two countries; it's other countries with visa restriction. The Russians have actually come out with a 31-page document on their own new, foreign policy approach and their intention to hit anyone that hits their citizen anywhere in the world. This is becoming more interesting. But as far as I'm concerned, I see that this is not going to, nobody is going to let off. And this is where I have problem with, because I was thinking negotiation will at least help to smoothen things. We know that even the Americans are not really confident about the grain deal that was entered into. We know that the EU are putting cap. And some of the EU countries are even complaining that some of these measures that we're taking is not going to let the Russians back off a bit, or to allow peace to reign, because I know that everybody is going on a tic-tac. So I have to agree with you that, number one, Ukraine is the battleground, and everybody is testing their weapons there. New weapons are being tested. They are looking at the precision of these things. They're using, and I think we have to say that even the Russians have queued up and started working with other countries now to also improve their strength. Not like before where they say, okay, yeah, we just go war to war. They are also improving their skill set. So the world is it's more of a dangerous place now, because everybody is improving their security might one way or the other. And that is not good news for many of us, especially we here in Europe, who are now wearing more jackets and more things to keep warm. So that is where the challenge is.
Indeed, we will have to wait and see. We will come back to you, of course, as time goes on, to check on you and how Britain is coping with that particular winter, which we had been talking about over the last couple of weeks. It is now because it has now come closer, much closer than we anticipated before, and Definitely. We'll have to see how it works out. But for now, thank you for your time on the program, and do stay safe out there.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
The United States has sanctioned an Iranian entity for its role in exporting an unmanned aerial vehicle to Russia to be used in Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Undersecretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, Brent Nelson, said this, and also designated 3 companies and an individual for their role in the provision of drones to Iranian military entities. He said, quote, Russia is making increasingly desperate choices to continue its unprovoked war against Ukraine, particularly in the face of our unprecedented sanctions and export controls. Meanwhile, CIA Director Bill Burns is saying Russia is going to pay a heavy price for it a long time because of its war in Ukraine. He was speaking at a cybersecurity conference in Washington, D.C., where he added, quote, I think if you take a step back now, it's hard to see the record of the war. That's Putin's record as anything other than a failure so far. Not only has the weakness of the Russian military been exposed, but there's going to be a long-term damage done to the Russian economy and to generations of Russians as a result of this. Mr. Burns added that in the northeastern part of Ukraine, he would not underestimate the capacity or the courage of the Ukrainians right now as well. And German Economy Minister Robert Habeck says the country will find a way to bring down gas prices, as the government cannot subsidize the high cost caused by Russian President Vladimir Putin forever. According to him, the most important thing is that we stop the price manipulation by Putin. We cannot subsidize against the high prices in the long run. That is why we now must and will change the energy market design. He added that the government would create a broad umbrella of rescue measures for German companies and open up relief programs for smaller businesses. And still to come on the program, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken bonds with Ukraine's famous mine detector dog. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back, as always, at this time. Ini John Mekwa, at least this week. Ini John Mekwa joins us on the program. Morning, Ini.
Good morning.
The European Central Bank has raised interest rates across the Eurozone by a record margin. Again,
yes.
For inflationary purposes. This after the U.S. Fed did something similar.
Yes, well, the U.S. Fed is also expected to raise by 0.75%. I mean, I don't think it's news anymore. I think even the investors have priced this into various parameters and stocks and all that, because Jerome Powell has not hidden the stance of, the Federal Reserve. They said that as long as inflation keeps going up, they will keep hiking rates.
The rates,
now,
right.
We know that ECB has been reluctant about that. So the first hike they did was it June, July? After 11 years, because they are more concerned about growth, economic growth, and all of that.
Avoiding recession.
Exactly. But we will know what happened then. That's the dollar and the euro were at par. I think that really broke their heart, and they have not. Now they are saying that they are going to keep hiking. The same thing that is going on in the U.S.
In
now.
the U.S. And the U.K. will probably follow suit.
I know, but UK is already there, because UK is closer to recession than
anybody else.
They're already in double-digit inflation. So, I mean, they are even more desperate, And that's why when we look at the new prime minister has a lot of work to do. We talked yesterday about some of her approaches, promised to cut taxes,
remove windfall taxes,
and people are asking
subsidies.
Exactly from where, and we talked about all of that yesterday. So also with the EU, this is what they're going through, and there are some things coming up also from that, because obviously with this it means that import is now more expensive, life is more expensive, purchasing power is not as much as it used to be, the value. So workers seem like they may be asking for a raise, and when they do that, of course, already liquidity is tight. Who is going to pay?
Who is going to pay? And where is the person going to pay, going to get it from?
Exactly. And then it now comes back again to the issue of inflation, because if workers get more money, that means more money will go into the economy. That's also increasing inflation. They're already at 9.1. So who knows? They say, okay, with this hike, with this 0.75, they hope that it will cut down to maybe 8% or something like that. But I mean, there's no assurance, because
there's nothing to say it will.
Energy prices, which is a major push here.
And they are not in control of that.
They are not in control of that.
Now, incidentally, I mean, we're talking about energy here. The other one, wheat, which is the one that, we are all looking at. That rose by about 2 to
3.8% up.
Depending on where you are.
Yes. So we know that not in Nigeria. Unfortunately, for about 5 months now, global food prices have been tapering, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, and mostly because of that agreement that they had at the Black Sea.
They to pass the grains
to. Yes, and then we now know that the Russian President Putin, has said that he believes that most of the wheat, which is supposed to go to the poorer countries, are not going to the poorer countries. They're going to Europe and Turkey. So that he may not extend.
Renew, he may not renew this.
So now wheat is reacting to that. Everything just reacts to everything. But I mean, we know President Putin. He says something, he will follow through with it.
He would actually go through with that, and that could have its own spiral-on effect.
It would
even before the 120 days that he's already agreed is over.
Yes, already. That's why we're seeing this. That's why we're seeing this, and because the world has come to know the kind of person he is. And even now, some of the shipping companies say they cannot send their ship to the Black Sea because they do not trust. Remember, some days even after the agreement, we had some issues, some blasts around there.
There were some blasts, there was an attack.
Exactly.
Which became contentious.
Exactly. So even, I mean, when you read, if you read analysts and some experiences, some of the shipping companies say, even as it is, they don't trust. So that's why it's not even, we're not feeling the impact as much as we would, because the logistics and supply chain
is still difficult. Even the United Nations was talking about that yesterday and day before yesterday, that the logistics is still quite temperate, and that's part of it. But the yuan transfer that you and I spoke about earlier this week, that's now active. At that time, it was going to be.
Yes, it was going to. We're talking about it now. It's not active. So there's an alternative to SWIFT for countries like Russia, like China, to do their transfer. So they can comfortably now, well, let me not say comfortably, but at least they can efficiently now, do transfers across borders and not resort to the dollar or to SWIFT. So this is working now. And then, you know, we have the one for the rubles also that Russia is working on that could use the rubles. We also have that working. And then we have this one with the yuan. So alternative to SWIFT and alternative to the dollar is seeing the light of the day.
It's now real.
It's now real.
It's now real. Thank you, Ini. Of course, we'll have more of the impact of this alternative system, what possible benefits or challenges it could bring for the dominance of the dollar or the new dominance of new currencies possibly right after this in the Business Morning and later on in Business Incorporated, amongst other business stories. So see you then, Ini.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a look at the sports. Manchester will now stage the World Dance Sport Federation European Breaking Championships this year, replacing Russia as host after the event was moved due to the invasion of Ukraine. The competition, which is being organized by Dance Sport England and Breaking GB, will take place on November the 5th and 6th at the Bellevue Sports Village. Dance Sport England and Breaking GB will be supported by the Manchester City Council and the UK Sports via the National Lottery funding. Breakers will be able to gain qualification points in the build-up to the Paris 2024 Olympics, where the sport is set to make its debut. And Football Union has announced friendly matches against Kyrgyzstan and Iran for its men's national team. Russia will take on Kyrgyzstan for the first time on September the 25th in Bishkek at the Dolan Ormursagov Stadium before facing Iran in November. A third friendly match is in the works. Russia is currently banned from FIFA and UEFA international competitions following the country's invasion of Ukraine. FIFA says the relevant national federations would need to provide necessary documentation for the matches to contribute towards their world rankings.
Actually, we'll prepare him and you can even take him.
Let's, yeah, I think he knows. Is it okay?
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Patron, an explosives detection dog which earned fame by sniffing out mines for the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. During his visit to the country, Mr. Blinken toured a children's hospital where he met doctors and the Jack Russell dog Patron and its handler. He then offered Patron a treat and picked him up. Later, Mr. Blinken was presented with a toy version of Patron, described as his brother. He then knelt down and showed Patron the toy version of himself. Patron first came to international prominence during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, during which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky awarded him the Order for Courage for his work in locating and defusing unexploded ordnance left behind by Russian troops.
And then please put your arm under his belt. There we go.
That's it.
Would you like to come with me? Yes.
Oh, I'm not sure how happy he is.
Okay, unexpected visit by unexpected visitors. That's where we wrap up the program this morning. Thanks for being with us. My name is Ladi Akiridulali. There's an update within the world today at 5. Do watch out for that. And the show is back on Monday. Do have yourselves a pleasant weekend.